questions I had to ask.
I think we could do one group, but I think I definitely want to be able to, maybe we can put the other, do you guys have more easels? Maybe we can put the other boards over here so people can see them easier.
I have some clipboards here to help with filling out.
Yeah.
How about retail? What kind of retail would go on there? Do you have any say about it? Because can we retail it closes down at 5, at 8? And we don't want a bar.
Right. Well, I think the biggest thing for me is so the
I'd like to call this meeting to order. Carla, can we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Long. Commissioner Berman.
Present.
Commissioner Savage.
Here.
Vice Chair Moffett. Here. Chair Gilardi.
Here. Item 3, land acknowledgement. The city of Cotati recognizes that we are on ancestral lands of the Coast Miwok, who are the original caretakers of this area. We respectfully acknowledge indigenous people who have been the stewards, who have been stewarding and maintaining the relationship on this land as knowledge keepers for millennia. This acknowledgement does not take the place of authentic relationships with indigenous communities, but serves as a gesture of respect to the land we are on. The Pledge Allegiance. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the November 18th meeting?
Chairman, did we get a communication from Neil about something that needed to be changed on that? Has that been taken care of yet, or?
Yes, we did. Thank
Okay.
you for bringing that up. I would like to add Neil's comments that he had sent to us to be included in the minutes.
Yeah, just to clarify, the comments requested formal acknowledgement of the resolution that was voted on. The commission didn't vote on any resolution, but there was a formal recommendation made, and we can amend the minutes to formalize that recommendation, just so it's documented a little bit more clearly, and then that document can be shared with Caltrans or other decision makers.
Thank you. Are there any other changes to the minutes? Can I have a motion, please?
Move to approve the minutes as amended.
May I have a second?
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion carries. Item 6, changes to the agenda.
There are no changes to the agenda this evening.
Thank you. Item 7, public comment on non-agendized items. Do we have any public for that? Carla, is there anyone online?
Thank you, Chair Gilardi. Speaking to our Zoom attendees, if you would like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon, or if you're dialing in, dial *9. Chair Gilardi, that will end public comment.
Thank you. Item 8, Planning Commission reorganization for the calendar year of 2025. Noah?
Carla Duncan will actually be presenting briefly on this item. And it is worth noting for everyone in the chamber and watching remotely this evening, tonight is the first night of using our brand-new audio-visual system for the meeting in the chamber. So we may be having some challenges and changes negotiating all the new features.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Carla Duncan, and I am a permit technician here with the City of Cotati. And tonight I will be briefly discussing the annual process of electing a chair, vice chair, and secretary to the Planning Commission. Per Planning Commission bylaws, rule number 1, these positions are typically decided upon at the second meeting in January of the new calendar year. However, since there's only one meeting in January, staff is putting this item forward to you during this special meeting today. Traditionally, the current vice chairperson is nominated by a fellow commissioner to be the new chair for the calendar year, and one commissioner will nominate another commissioner to be the new vice chair. The chair and vice chair have defined responsibilities in the Planning Commission bylaws. For the chairperson, these duties include ensuring an orderly meeting, revising the agenda ordering when necessary, among other responsibilities in the bylaws. The the vice chair's main responsibility is to run planning commission meetings when the chair is absent. Typically, the secretary of the planning commission is the community development director, according to the bylaws. However, the director may designate staff to perform the duties of secretary, including agenda creation and recording meeting minutes. Each of these nominations will be decided on by a majority vote for each position by commission. During this reorganization, staff wanted to take this opportunity to briefly discuss the duties of the Planning Commission as a whole. Generally speaking, these duties include the following: reviewing and taking final actions on planning entitlement projects, reviewing the environmental impacts of proposed projects, project consistency with the general plan, as well as updates to this plan when required, and other duties delegated by the City Council. All of these duties are described in detail in the Planning Commission bylaws, which organize the structure of the Planning Commission meetings themselves. These bylaws were updated last year to add the land acknowledgement and Pledge of Allegiance sections to the agenda and will be signed by the new chair after tonight's meeting. Now for the recommendation. It is recommended by the Community Development Department that the Planning Commission elect a chair, vice chair, and secretary for the calendar year 2025 during the special meeting on January 13th, 2025. Thank you, and let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you. Do you call for?
So now if there is, it's, as Carla identified, it's typical or it's been a practice of the commission for the vice chair to be nominated and to serve as the chair. And then if that were to occur, then Vice Chair Moffitt would be nominated and with the vote of the commission, elected to serve as the chair. And then we would need to replace Vice Chair Moffitt with a new vice chair. And that would also be a nomination process and then a vote. And then similarly nominating me to serve as the secretary to the commission.
I'd like to nominate Vice Chair Moffitt to be the chair of the Planning Commission.
I'll second that.
I'll accept. Thank you.
And so then we'll just have our vote. Kevin can decide whether we do roll call or I'm not sure what the term for
We'll go with a roll call vote.
there you go.
Commissioner Savage,
Yes.
Commissioner Long,
Yes.
Commissioner Berman,
Yes.
Vice Chair Moffitt,
Can I vote? Yes.
Chair Gilardi.
Yes.
And I'd like to nominate Commissioner Long to be the vice chair.
And I'll second that.
I accept. Thank you.
Commissioner Savage,
Yes.
Commissioner Long,
Yes.
Commissioner Berman,
Yes.
Chair Moffitt,
Yes.
outgoing Chair Gilardi.
Yes. All yours.
Right away, huh?
Well, we need to thank you and do a party and stuff. They got cookies, right?
Cookies?
I'm not, we will be ready for that celebration at the next meeting.
And I'd like to nominate Noah to be the secretary.
I happily accept.
That's seconded.
Yeah.
Roll call vote?
Commissioner Savage,
Yes.
Commissioner Long,
Yes.
Commissioner Berman,
Yes.
Chair Moffitt,
Yes.
outgoing Chair Gilardi.
Yes.
Apologies to Commissioner Long, Vice Chair Long. Thank you.
Excellent. So the commission is reorganized. You can take your seat.
Oh.
One thing at a time, one thing at a time. And Chair Moffett, it would be appropriate to hold public comment, given that that is an agenda item.
Thank you. Is there public comment on the reorganization of the Planning Commission? Carla, is there anyone on Zoom?
Thank you, Chair Moffett. Walter, you have the floor.
Okay. Two things real quickly. We're a property owner in Cotati. This is the first planning commission meeting that we've come to, and I have to tell you that so far I am really impressed with how well the planning commission runs its business. Thank you.
Let's see, it looks like Chair Moffett, that will end public comment.
Thank you very much. All right, moving on to the Santara Way specific plan update.
I just wanted to thank Ed for his service. Thank you, Chair Gilardi, outgoing Chair Gilardi, for your service. You've been a fine role model, and you've handled the public quite well, and me as well. As you know, I'm difficult to handle. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Here, here. Okay. With that, let's move on to our next agenda item, the Santara Way specific plan update and draft environmental impact report.
Thank you, Chair Moffett.
Excuse me, I do need to recuse myself for this topic, so I'll be back afterwards. Don't forget to get me. Okay.
Item 8B on tonight's agenda is the Santara Way Specific Plan Update and Draft EIR as identified. And our consultant for this whole process has been Four Leaf, and Luke Lindenbush, Senior Planner with Four Leaf. Supervising Planner has also been the project manager and is lead on the presentation this evening.
Thank you very much, Community Development Director Hausch. Good evening, Chair Moffett, Vice Chair Long, and Commission. Honored to be the first one to get to say that. And good evening to the Cotati community for showing up tonight as well. This is really the culmination of close to a year and a half of effort of bringing forward an update to the Cotati Santara Way specific plan, which we'll be getting into. And I really just wanted to start off the presentation acknowledging everybody who's been a part of this process up until this point, the members of the community who are well represented by a community advisory committee, a technical advisory committee comprised of various government agency and other technical advisor staff from throughout the city and the region, countless community members who showed up and provided input on how the plan should be shaped, and a variety of team members on my own team at Four Leaf, great environmental team at Rincon Consultants who prepared the EIR, Fair and Peers who did the traffic analysis, Carollo advisors who provided advisement on utilities, specifically water and wastewater. And once again, really just every single member of the community who showed up over the last year and a half and was part of this planning process. So happy to take you tonight through the course of the final draft plan and receive input moving forward into adoption. Next slide, please. So first, I really just want to go into what is a specific plan. We'll go into the Santara Way specific plan and the history of that specific plan. But really, it's pretty much stated in the title of the plans themselves. The general plan is more general and the specific plan is more specific. But beyond that kind of cheeky explanation, it really is a planning document that puts forth the implementation priorities in a specific area of the general plan, which covers the entire city. Upcoming projects have to be consistent with the specific plan. So this is really an important development blueprint and a way to shape a specific part of a city, in this case surrounding the Cotati Smart train station. It's also important to note that the specific plan has to be consistent with the city's adopted general plan. However, it does not have to be exactly the same, and it can amend and revise or clarify areas where it's inconsistent through different policies that are set forth. It's also subject to a variety of state laws, regional policies, and other considerations, which we'll be going into a bit over the course of the presentation, in particular with an eye toward the Transit-Oriented Communities, or TOC, policy. Next slide. So really looking at where the specific plan started, just about 25 years ago. The plan was first adopted in 2001, and it looks considerably different from the plan that is in front of you today. After the formation and adoption of the first Santara Way specific plan in 2001, over 100 housing units have been built, and there are an additional 89 units in the development pipeline. It was a fantastic plan in a number of ways for what it was able to accomplish over within the specific plan area. However, there were a number of challenges that were presented by forces larger than the plan itself over the last 25 years, and also ones that were specific to the specific plan. Some of those were that there was a greater commercial development that was anticipated than actually materialized. This was largely due to the Great Recession, other factors of land use, but it had to do with the standards that were set forth in the plan as well. The 2001 plan was considerably more prescriptive than what we've been striving to do with the 2025 plan. And that's one of the reasons why you see a number of vacant parcels within the plan area. As a result, there are some opportunities that were presented by the update to the 2001 plan, really to support new development. There's development proposals that were approved, as noted, that came in for the area. But there's existing needs that were known going into this planning process and that we were able to delve deeper into over the last year plus. That includes existing needs around parking, and the need to comply with certain regulatory mandates around parking policy, which we'll get into as well, in addition to a number of policies that have really just changed a lot since 2001. So on the next slide, we'll get into the overview of the Santara Way specific plan of 2025, which is recommended for adoption this year and for the Planning Commission to recommend adoption to the City Council. Really what we strive to do with this specific plan was to modernize the existing Santara Way specific plan. Much of the intent of the existing specific plan to intensify development within the area with a substantial amount of vacant parcels was consistent. However, it's a modernized specific plan in the sense that there's a lot of policy that the city has adopted over the last 25 years. Specific plans 25 years ago tended to be more prescriptive, and now we're at a point where cities have objective design standards. Their zoning codes look very different. So there's a much more robust suite of policies on a city level that the city is able to rely on without necessarily specifically stating everything within this plan. So that's one of the areas where we were really looking at how the city has progressed over the last 25 years, where a plan could be as straightforward and effective as possible and really be compatible with citywide policies. The specific plan is responsive to key developments since the adoption of the 2001 plan, notably the Katahdin Smart Station. There was no smart line in 2001. There was no smart station depot, which now exists. So that has shaped the area considerably. So all of the considerations going into the plan around ridership, how commuters and residents and commercial shoppers alike are using the plan area. There's a much different dynamic at play because there are many more people who are passing through the plan area on a day-to-day basis to take the train. Finally, we really wanted to make sure that the 2025 update to the specific plan was as adaptable as possible to evolve within the next 15 and 20 years of the planning horizon. The 2001 plan, as I mentioned, was pretty prescriptive in terms of what could be developed there. There was an overall cap on the number of residential units and commercial square footage, and we really wanted this one to remain flexible to allow for mixed use, commercial, residential, to be able to ride whatever economic waves are coming forward in the next 15 to 20 years and really develop at the highest and best use and in a way that is most community serving for the residents and visitors of the area. So moving on to the next slide. Really looking at the structure of the document itself, we have an introduction that goes into all of the history of the document that we just outlined, in addition to some of the different ways that the document can be read and used, whether you're a community member who's interested in learning more about the specific plan, whether you're a developer that's interested in building within the area. We really tried to make it as much of a guide as possible to outline exactly what's in the plan, how it can be used, and also how we got there, informed by community engagement. The guiding principles and goals of the document set forth kind of the overall structure of the policies and implementation actions of the document itself. Before we go into some of the planning specific areas, circulation and mobility. Again, this is one that changed considerably since the 2001 plan, since the establishment of the SMART train within the plan area. But there's also considerations around parking that are addressed in the circulation and mobility section. There's considerations around emergency vehicle access. Majority of the plan area is a one-way in, one-way out cul-de-sac. And if you build a certain amount of units, you need to be able to account for what the fire and emergency evacuation access is going to be for that planning area. Land use and housing, another big one. I'll get into the TOC policies in a second, but this is one where we have a certain framework that we have to work within to establish minimum and maximum densities. Also looking at ways to basically make sure that the specific plan is consistent with existing city policy that's been developed in the last handful of years, namely the objective design and development standards that basically state what development has to look like in terms of design, the kind of features that need to be included as it pertains to open space, things along those lines. Public facilities and infrastructure section is intended to be a summary of the environmental impact report in some of the key points that are existing there in terms of availability of water and wastewater, solid utilities, electricity, all of these considerations to make sure that over the build out of the planning horizon that the lights are going to be able to stay on, the trash is going to be able to be collected, the deliveries are going to be able to be made, those considerations in public facilities and infrastructure. In addition to the existing assets within the plan area, there's a number of publicly owned parcels owned by both the city, such as the train station depot and the gravel lot next door to it. There's also the SMART station itself, which is owned by the Sonoma Marin Area Rail Transit, in addition to the parking lot at the SMART station, which is owned by Sonoma County Transit. So there's a number of considerations for how those public assets are going to be preserved and utilized over the plan horizon as well. And then finally, implementation is the last section of the specific plan. As I noted when talking about what a specific plan is, implementation is really what differentiates a specific plan from a general plan or other elements of the general plan, in that a specific plan has to look at a certain time horizon and provide an action plan for how the plan is going to be implemented. That includes funding and financing mechanisms, in addition to a suite of policies and programs that the city is going to continue to uphold to support and be able to pivot if necessary over the course of the planning period. So moving into the next slide, please. Community engagement was a huge part of the planning process. And in fact, it's maybe a bit too much to put onto one slide, but really this was a community-driven plan, and we did everything that we could to be really embedded within the community over the course of this process. This is the first plan that I've ever had the luck and good fortune to work on, where I was able to actually be in an office within the plan area, and that completely changed how we developed this plan from day one. The city owns the Cotati Smart Station Depot, and my firm, Four Leaf, rented the station depot for 3 months at the very beginning of the project to just work on site, to talk to neighbors, see how often people are riding the train, when people are riding the train, where people are parking, just getting a sense of the hustle and bustle of the area. And that really allowed us the opportunity to have that vantage point of not just planning from our desks, but really being able to be within a pretty small area and understand some of the dynamics at play. That pop-up office also was really one of the first times that the station depot was used, since it was commissioned around, I want to say 2007, maybe a little bit later than that, maybe around 2010. And so it was a great way from our perspective of how to activate the space and really ask community members, invite them in, say, hey, this is a publicly owned space, this building, it's not just like a Hollywood facade or something. You can actually walk in and there's rooms and there's bathrooms, and it is a community asset, and really figuring out how to make it something that can be used moving forward. So that was one goal of the pop-up office, and really just providing community members, residents, an opportunity to use that activated space as well, not just us using it as our office. But we hosted a series of local and regional events there. In addition to my role as project manager for this project, I helped manage our regional housing policy planning collaborative between Napa and Sonoma counties, and we had a regional housing resource fair that was very well attended in late 2023. There was also an active transportation plan workshop that was hosted by Farron Pierce, also our transportation consultant for this project, but who was working on the countywide active transportation plan. So that provided a central location, not just for Cotati residents, but for residents all around the region to be able to experience this asset and get thinking about sort of what the station depot could be used for moving forward. In addition, this photo that you see here on this slide is from our Community Advisory Committee, all 3 meetings of which were held at the station depot. It took some creativity with arrangement of tables because it is a very long space, but as you see here, but we made it work, and that also helped inform some of the different ways that we might be able to use, the city might be able to use this space moving forward. The Community Advisory Committee, as I mentioned, met 3 times over the course of early 2024 to really inform the development of the plan. The Community Advisory Committee was comprised mostly of residents from the immediate planning area, both within the plan area, residents from next door on Windmill Farms, business owners, both past and prospective future developers involved in the area, and some regional advocates as well. Technical Advisory Committee was formed with various members from a number of different agencies, transportation agencies, Sonoma County Transportation, Sonoma County Transportation Authority, the SMART Authority, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, which covers the entire Bay Area, Rancho Adobe Fire District, the City of Rohnert Park, which is also a key stakeholder in this plan, as the entirety of the plan area is for the most part surrounded by the City of Rohnert Park. So making sure that we were coordinating with them was of key importance. A number of different agency partners on the TAC to help provide input on the EIR, on the evacuation analyses, transportation planning, really everything to do with the plan itself, anticipating things that we might not have been able to during the planning process because of their very specific and valuable expertise. In addition, we had neighborhood and stakeholder engagement. Most of the neighborhood engagement really came from just walking around the neighborhood, talking to people who are saying, hey, I'm seeing someone in this station depot for the first time. What's going on here? Are you, who are you? What's happening here? And then having the opportunity to say, yeah, we're focusing on a plan for the area. What would you like to see here? So that was a large extent of our neighborhood engagement, talking to people going on and off the train, going on the train with iPads, taking surveys, all kinds of different ways that we really just got out there and talked to people about what they wanted to see. Stakeholder engagement largely focused on business owners within the area who were represented on the Community Advisory Committee, but also wanted to make sure that their input was received as well. And all of this really fed into 2 surveys on both opportunities, kind of high level, more what do you want to see in the area, and then alternatives, which were able to drill down into really specific issues. We had a long list of potential uses for the station depot that residents were able to respond to, community members were able to respond to on that. Options around parking, options around design. Really, some of the thornier issues that we were able to identify about halfway through the project were reflected in that alternative survey, number 2. In addition, we canvassed and talked with Sonoma State University residents, or students rather, and residents, including a guest lecture that Director Hausch and I attended early in the process, like just 2 weeks after the kickoff presentation in October 2023. So that was a great way to get students involved in the planning process early on. It's kind of a unique, opportunity in terms of involving students because downtown is definitely a place where Sonoma State students are interested in going. But in terms of proximity to Sonoma State, the station area, the specific plan area is really the midpoint between Cotati's downtown and Sonoma State University itself. So we made sure to really stay as engaged as possible with the Sonoma State community throughout the planning process. And finally, ongoing workshops throughout the planning process were held primarily at the Planning Commission, including the kickoff in October 2023, an alternatives workshop that we held with you last summer. And this is just some of the ways that we, made sure to engage with the community. Again, this is a really small plan area, but it's one that has a lot of potential, and we wanted to make sure to really hear from as many direct local residents as well as, regional commuters, everything as possible. I don't live in Cotati, but I, live nearby in West Sonoma County, and this is my train station. Most major planning documents would say that, the Santa Rosa stations are my station, but Cotati is because it has parking for one reason, and also because I like coming to Cotati, and I know that's the case for a lot of people around the region. So this is a really important area for not just this very local, hyper-local area within the plan, but also the broader community. Moving into the next slide, please. So looking at the project context, the current Santero Way specific plan area is outlined here in the diagram in red, current referring to the 2001 specific plan. But we also added 3 additional parcels along East Cotati Avenue to really consider planning around the station. Again, when this was originally conceived, planners might not have been thinking about the presence of the station, or at least sort of the outsized presence it would have on the plan area. So really looking directly across there to all of the adjacent parcels along East Cotati, going up to Sunflower Park was part of our planning process there. Again, it's a pretty small specific plan area. It's about 25 acres of land, but as you can see from the aerial there, the majority of it is vacant and available for development. The part of the project context was really updating the zoning designations to, again, just provide more flexibility around mixed use, neighborhood serving, retail development, community serving uses. In 2001, it was just sort of around the time of the .com bubble bursting, and I think then the prior plan had they were considering a lot more office than our plan would today. So really looking at other forms of commercial development within the project context of the plan as well. And finally, really looking at new commercial and residential zoning designations to rezone parcels within the TOC structure, which I'll be getting into, for a minimum of 25 dwelling units an acre and a maximum of at least 35 dwelling units an acre, and a commercial range of 1 to 3 FAR, or floor area ratio. So that's really for alignment with the TOC policies and also a way to support development within the plan area. Next slide, please. So I've been talking a bit about this TOC policy, the Transit-Oriented Communities Policy, and this is a policy that is on a regional basis through the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, and it applies to all fixed guideway transit areas within the Bay Area, or will by 2026. The conditioning of TOC compliance is one Bay Area grant funding, infrastructure funding that is often utilized by public works departments, including the city of Cotati's. So this is really important and something that'll be more of an issue throughout the Bay Area over the next couple of years. But in short, the TOC policy, the big piece is making sure that there are those minimum and maximum densities for both residential and commercial development. Also on a policy level, that there are citywide policies for affordable housing production, preservation, and protection, also known as the 3 Ps. Many of these are already established in the city's housing element, but these will continue to be updated going into 2026 to ensure ongoing compliance. In addition, parking management is a big factor of the TOC policy. The city cannot impose parking minimums within a half-mile radius of transit stations. including the Cotati Smart Station pursuant to recent state law, Assembly Bill 2097. So this is one facet that we were looking at. You can't require minimum parking. Development could come in with 0 spaces per unit for residential or commercial development. But how do we make sure the community needs are served through parking policy? So we looked at that through the development of parking management plans, making sure that multimodal forms of transportation were supported, things along those lines to make sure that, there just wasn't absolutely nothing done when there's, 0 parking potentially provided. And finally, transit station access is one of the core areas of TOC policy. Looking at the transit station as a mobility hub, making it something that can be accessed by people of all abilities, all modes of transportation, by bike, on foot, by car, and making sure that the station itself is accessible, which also factors into some of our land use decisions involving things like evacuation routes. Moving into the next slide, please. So the TOC area is the half-mile radius around the train station. The 25 acres that comprise the Santero Way specific plan area are just a kind of tiny slice of that. So about midway through the process, as the TOC policies were coming online, which were most recently updated in November, we were looking at ways to, while we were doing an environmental impact report, making sure that we could set the city up for success moving forward so that they didn't have to go back to the drawing board and do the whole planning process over again to come into compliance with the TOC policies. So you'll notice upon looking at the plan, which is really focused on that core plan area, and looking at the EIR, that the EIR considers additional parcels within the broader half-mile radius covered by the TOC policies. You'll see in this diagram that those are indicated in blue for the ones that are outside of the plan area, but within the TOC area. Moving to the southwest, that's the Oliver's parking lot and commercial center there to the west. So there's a number of different parcels that would be subject to the TOC policies that we wanted to make sure were studied. So the city didn't have to go finish this EIR and go do another one within the next couple of years. So the rezoning and land use decisions that are before you tonight on a planning level are really focused on the plan area itself. The EIR is really just looking toward the future. I'll also just note that, to my knowledge, the city is one of the first, if not the first, jurisdictions to come into compliance with TOC policies. So this was kind of a midway pivot in terms of our project, making sure that NOAA didn't have to come back and do a bunch of work while we were already doing these processes. Moving into the next slide, please. So the transit-oriented communities TOC approach to density. Again, just kind of reiterating that the plan really remains focused on that 25 acres, whereas the TOC area is focused on the environmental and both the transportation analysis in the EIR to make sure that the city can have maximum options moving forward. Next slide.
Can you elaborate
Sure.
on that a little bit further, the number 2 item?
Absolutely. So, yeah, so there's, so in terms of, just the build out potential of the EIR, there's some flexibility for parcels to be able to be rezoned moving into the future. So those parcels along East Cotati, providing that analysis within the EIR, so further action can be taken later. And yeah, no, I'll let you jump in.
Yeah, I'll just add, so we had started the Santero Way update process, started the environmental analysis of the impacts of upzoning essentially the Santero neighborhood, and then got the TOC policies kind of pushed down from the state and the regional government. And we quickly realized that in order to meet those policies beyond just the station area, we need environmental analysis on that future upzoning in order to be able to do it. And so we went to the city council, told them of this kind of conundrum where if we don't include potentially dealing with those other parcels that are within that half-mile radius but outside of the Santero plan now, then we're going to have to address it in the future. And so the consultants were able to kind of pivot, as Luke said, expand the scope of the EIR to look at upzoning all those parcels that are down East Cotati that are potentially subject to TOC, and those are the blue ones that were highlighted in the previous slide. And so the council supported making the decision to include them in the EIR. The decision whether to upzone those or not is a future decision that has not yet been made, But the city council funded that change because if we choose to not upzone those parcels, we will lose out on about $1 million a year in grant money that pays for our infrastructure. So we wanted to put the city in the best place possible to make that future decision because of the consequences of deciding against it and not being prepared with the environmental analysis to be able to implement that TOC.
What do you say that zoning is?
Yeah, so right now, most zoning districts in the city, have a range of density that we're allowed. And the highest one that the city has is 15 units per acre. That's the highest density we allow anywhere in Cotati. This plan, because of its proximity to the train station, is required to allow a minimum of 25 to 35 units to the acre on not any parcel, but many parcels within a half-mile radius of the train station. If it's developed with a single-family use already or a residential use already, it's exempted from that requirement to upzone it. But a lot of the land in that half-mile radius is either vacant, like a lot of the parcels in Santero, or commercial, which then the Oliver's parking lot is an example where Oliver's could develop some of that parking lot with apartments, but we needed some type of residential density to decide what that would be in the future if it were to happen. And that's what that TOC upzoning does, is it establishes that density for both residential and commercial developments on all parcels that are subject to it, so there's some exemptions, within the half-mile radius. So the EIR is broader than the Santero Way specific plan.
All right, moving into the next slide. So approaches to parking, I want to bring this up, talked about how parking minimums can't be imposed within that half-mile radius, but wanted to specifically call out parking maximums, since this is new for most cities, including Cotati, which currently doesn't have parking maximums. So the TOC policy requires that new developments, again, this will only apply to new developments, not existing developments, have to have a parking maximum of 1.5 spaces on average per unit. And new commercial development is maxed out at 4 spaces for every 1,000 square feet. There's a number of ways that parking management can be strategic under these regulations, such as utilization of land for parking structures, things along those lines. But in terms of parking that is directly connected to new development, these are the maximums that are set forth by TOC policy and proposed within the plan. Moving into the next slide. The proposed zoning, well, just first off, I'll note before jumping into the zoning that the land use for existing parcels within Santero Way is the Santero Way land use designation, and that will continue to be utilized. Basically, that the specific plan dictates land uses that are allowed, so that will remain consistent, and the new parcels that have been added along East Cotati Avenue will also be provided with that Santero Way land use designation. It also was the Santero Way zoning designation throughout the entirety of the planning area in the prior iteration of the plan, and that's been revised with this plan to provide a little bit more of a demarcation between the two sections of Santero Way based on community input. We heard consistently from survey responses, from members of the Community Advisory Committee, from technical stakeholders looking at evacuation considerations, that really making sure that the terminus farther down into Santero Way be more residentially focused, and that commercial and mixed-use opportunities are really focused along the East Cotati corridor. So the TOC district, zoning district is proposed for that more kind of seafoam color along East Cotati in the northern portion of the plan area. And the Santero Way district is south of and inclusive of all the existing townhome developments within the plan area down to the end of the Santero Way cul-de-sac for more 100% residential development. The TOC district still has flexibility, so 100% residential could come in any of those parcels closer to the station and to East Cotati Avenue, but there's a greater flexibility allowed for commercial and mixed-use applications within that zoning district.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add is when Luke says the land use designation, that's the general plan designation. And then the zoning, we're going to come back with the rezoning ordinance before you to drill down and be specific to implement this kind of separation of the district into a more residential focus and one that is more mixed-use focus as you get closer to East Cotati Avenue.
Yeah, thank you, Noah. Next slide. Now looking at some proposed solutions to potential challenges that were noted throughout the planning process. Parking, once again, came up a lot. Street parking in particular is pretty scarce along Santero Way at different times of the day. So we really looked at ways to be creative about maximizing public parking availability through the street sections that were formed in the plan area, allowing for perpendicular parking as opposed to just parallel parking along the street to make sure that that was built into the street standard. Even if the city can't require parking within new developments, we can maximize the amount of available street parking to utilize that land. In addition, evacuation routes on both public and private property. There is an evacuation route that is proposed at the stub toward the north end of Santero to best utilize the train station. When you go to the Cotati train station, you see bike parking. You see Redwood Bike Share e-bikes that you can use very recently. You see electric vehicle charging. A lot of amenities that are really looking at making sure that transportation can be more sustainable, not just getting more people to take the train, but really making sure that there's options for people to get to the train station and to get to the area. So you see a number of amenities, more so I would say than a lot of other smart stations already there. So really just building on that existing progress and making sure that more options can be continued to be provided, especially as the plan area develops. In addition, flexible design standards are a proposed solution within the plan to accommodate increased density. Those are specifically called out within the specific plan to basically defer to the city's objective design standards with some areas where there's more flexibility. For denser development, there might be more opportunities to have rooftop terraces, things along those lines, as a way to satisfy open space requirements, especially when there's a higher lot coverage allowed to accommodate the densities required. Things along those lines. There was community input that a wider range of design standards and aesthetic feel be allowed than what exists within the city's existing design standards, which generally tend to prioritize more of a craftsman look, conducive to more of a lower to medium density development typology. So really looking at making sure that that requirement wasn't going to hamstring any developments that move forward, that they can have a little bit more of a contemporary look and feel to demarcate a little bit the difference between the plan area and the station area and create that as kind of a visual hub of its own. Finally, expanding infrastructure to support intensified land use. Some of these solutions were really just involved in the EIR. We did a water supply assessment to make sure that all uses into the future can be supported and that those are studied there. But also in the implementation programs, funding and financing for a variety of forms of infrastructure, looking at different economic models like an enhanced infrastructure financing district, pursuing certain state and federal grant programs to support the development of housing, the development of improved street standards, things along those lines. Moving into the next slide. So just to give a high-level overview of the planning process of just where we are and next steps, we're here at the adoption hearings in 2025. But I just want to note that since this is the end of the planning process in terms of developing the specific plan, it's really not the end of the specific plan by any stretch because implementation is such a major part of every specific plan. So that'll be an ongoing effort, and I'm certain more items will come back to this Planning Commission and members of the public to review as different facets of the plan are implemented. And finally, TOC compliance actions. We did as much as we possibly could with some guidance that was changing over the planning process to make sure that the city was in compliance with the wide range of TOC requirements. However, those actions will be required by early 2026, around February 2026. So those compliance actions may follow as well, including the rezoning that is a separate process from the adoption of this plan. So moving into the next slide. The staff recommendation this evening is for the Planning Commission to open the public hearing to public comment and questions, discussion, and input on the plan documents from the Planning Commission as well. And staff recommends certification of the environmental impact report and adoption of the updated Santero Way specific plan. So with that, Chair Moffett and Commission, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much, Luke. Fellow commissioners, questions, clarifying, before we open it to public comment? Okay, let's go ahead and open it up to public comment. Would anyone in the audience like to comment at this time? Seeing no one jump up enthusiastically, let's move over to Carla. Carla, anyone on Zoom?
Thank you, Chair Moffett. Lori, you have the floor.
One thing I read in this, in the packet was 1,800 people. You want to add 700 housing units? I think it's in the transit district. How could 1,800 more people supposed to evacuate down that one, a cul-de-sac, you know, or any amount more? I mean, I've heard for years that Santero Way at night has no parking and everything. You guys aren't going to see it in the day, the planners. So this makes no sense. I get it that the state is coming down on us, but who knows the future with, with the fires and everything, we might be changing our whole housing, whatever, because of that. We don't know the future, and just going with the state mandates as of today just doesn't seem like a good idea. That's it.
Thank you.
Walter, you have the floor.
Biggest concern we had, my wife and I, when we received this notification of this planning meeting, was that the property we own is at 475 East Cotati, which is across the street from Oliver's. I noted there is a very small amount of commercial area next to our set of townhouses called Fern Village. But I believe I noted that only Fern Village was included in the residential section. Directly behind me along East Cotati are some other townhouses, et cetera, that weren't included. Am I correct in identifying, it was a little hard from the map to identify, but I'm pretty sure that the existing units at 475 East Cotati were included. I don't want to disrupt this meeting too much, but this is my only opportunity to ask the question as to whether or not that's the case. Are we able to make a statement about that at this meeting, about the housing units there?
I believe they're looking right now.
Terrific.
475 East Cotati Avenue is included in the TOC, the future TOC rezoning options that were analyzed in the EIR. It is not proposed to be changed with the Santero plan, but it was included in the larger scope as discussed previously.
But why wasn't just the residential, the commercial area that's just adjacent to 475 included? I'm not sure why our housing units were included when those right next door to us were not. So, maybe that's not possible to identify at this moment?
So without getting a very detailed description of the what the TOC policies allow and disallow, there's an exemption from TOC upzoning requirements if it's existing parcel developed with residential units. Essentially, you can imagine if all of the single-family homes within a half-mile radius of the train station were all of a sudden upzoned to 25 to 35 units per acre, and the disruption that could have if that occurred on a parcel-by-parcel basis. So the state took out those parcels from being subject to the requirements of TOC. However, commercial parcels or portions of them are subject to that.
Okay, well, I'll accept that as a suggestion that the existing residential units, that one of which we own, will not be required to be upzoned. Then I'm satisfied with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Neil, you have the floor.
Yes, hello. Thank you for the presentation. And I was involved in one of the community committees that was there. I did actually go around the Santero Way looking at what the parking was, and appreciate that there's going to be the drive-in parking, and that will make more of it. I appreciate that parking is often viewed in a peak sense, that when you can't find something at a peak time, it's a challenge. But when I was looking around, there wasn't a lot of complete, all the parking wasn't used up at the times. But it really depends on what the usages of the buildings are. So if it's going to be a lot of students that go in there, then yes, there's likely to be some of the peak parking. What would be better is to actually make it so that there can be some local parking that can be auctioned or paid for, something like the hotspot, I think it was called, where parking can be made available in a different way. But I really appreciate there's been a lot of work that's looked at that parking, and it's just going to be a judgment call as to how well it works. It is meant for people using the station more, and that's the challenge. So very good to see the plan. Thank you very much.
Chair Moffat, that will end public comment.
I'd like to reopen it to the floor. If anyone here would like to, come on forward.
Good evening. I'm Loretta Garcia. I live across the street on Sunflower Drive. I'm a condominium owner, as well as a retired teacher from Cotati-Rohnert Park. Am I allowed to ask 2 questions?
Yeah.
Okay. Just for clarification, listening to the presentation, thank you very much. It was excellent. Could someone explain to me what a 1.5 parking space actually is versus a whole parking space or 2 whole? And secondly, the quotation, at least 1 emergency exit. I'd like to know who determines and how is it determined 1 exit, 2 exits, 3 exits? I'm concerned about that because we only have 1 exit at Sunflower Drive. And we talk about that always during the fire season. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to jump into those. The first one, first going into the parking consideration with the emergency vehicle access. So in terms of what we're required to do, we're required to have 1 EVA for the planning area if it's a one-way in, one-way out. But there's a number of other considerations that we included within some of the land use criteria to make sure that there's a drive aisle around the entirety of future new developments that would be able to be accessed by a fire truck, for example. In addition to, just making sure that that can be as responsive to public safety as possible. It also was corresponding with public input on the kind of parking that people wanted to see. There was less of an interest on parking lots that abut Santero Way directly and more on, moving kind of the, landscaping or buildings closer to the road to create a more pleasant streetscape. So there's kind of 2 different areas that are being accessed with that. Noah, did you have anything to add on the parking piece?
Just for 1.5 per unit, so if you had a 10-unit apartment building, you would require 15 parking spaces. So it's not a 1-to-1 ratio of parking, but it's more than 1 space per unit. The state has imposed a maximum in these transit areas at 1.5 per unit that can be built. And no parking minimum is required for development per those state standards. And then just adding to the emergency vehicle access, Because the entire Santero neighborhood is surrounded by Roner Park jurisdiction, we had limited abilities to find other ways to get out. We would have preferred to have a exit point down at the end of the cul-de-sac. And so now there will be a requirement to utilize the little stub street on Breen Way, if you're familiar. There's a stub street on Breen Way that touches the backside of one of the properties on Santero. That will be required to serve as an EVA. Further, as the developments along the east side of Santero happen, as Luke mentioned, the parking lot drive aisle will be required to essentially connect across all of those parcels, allowing somebody who lives in a future apartment development down by the end of the cul-de-sac to drive continuously all the way along the east side of those buildings and exit kind of through Depot Way, all the way up by the parking lot, if you think about that. And then the last thing that the city's done to try to address this issue is we own the gravel parking lot at the end of Santero, and we've recorded an easement across that lot that will serve as another evacuation point, so a circulation route separate from Santero itself and separate from Breen that will be developed, if it's determined to be needed, to allow people to drive directly onto East Cotati from essentially the smart parking lot, but the east side of all those developments that will happen and currently exist on Santero. And then the last part of her question was who requires it? So there's a state law that says any development over 50 units is required to have an emergency evacuation route, and then the fire department is the kind of the overseer of enforcing that requirement.
Any other public comments? Fellow commissioners?
I'll start off. First, I want to thank staff and everyone in the community that got involved in this process. It's been going on for well over a year. And I think that's how we develop a good plan moving forward. There was over 100 comments and ideas and suggestions received from the community, which was wonderful feedback, and I really appreciate that. I really like the idea that the current plan, as it was stated, was very tightly formatted. And this one has a lot of flexibility built into it to, bring us years of planning decisions, basically, for us to look at, especially with the fact that the state is constantly mandating new changes all the time that ties our hands with what we can and cannot do. And I know it was brought up about the evacuation of that area. Noah just touched on it, but the fire department was involved in working on an evacuation circulation plan, which was, I think, really important. And I know one of the frustrations for years has been parking, and one of the frustrations for years over in that area has just been, the undeveloped areas. I would love to see a developer come in, bring us a great project, we approve it, and they build it right away. But that doesn't always happen. A lot of times we'll see a project go through the whole process, suggest changes, work out compromises, get a good plan brought forward, and then either the developers just sit on it for years, which we've seen, or some developers, okay, now I've got this great plan approved, and they try to sell it to somebody else, which delays anything from actually happening. It'd be nice if a developer actually did something and then followed through and built the plan. A correction in our packet that I want to bring up on page 21, it states where the bicycle network depicted on figure 6, it should be figure 9. Am I correct on that, Noah? But other than that, I'm really pleased, like I said, with all the input we got from the community, all the work that's gone into this plan, and I think it's a positive piece of work that we have to move forward, and look forward to future decisions as far as the types and kinds of developments that are going to be going over there. At that time, we're going to be able to have more discussion on the individual projects, what kind of parking they have, making sure that proper evacuation, circulation routes are put in place. We've got plans looking at that, so I think this is a very good piece. Again, thank you for everybody that was involved in putting this together.
So with the, excuse me, with the previous Santero Way specific plan, you mentioned that it was more prescriptive, and that caused issues with, adaptability over time as economic changes occurred. Could you kind of compare and contrast a little bit of how the last one was more prescriptive and how this one is less prescriptive to kind of avoid those issues going forward?
Certainly. I think the first one really has to do with density. There was sort of a cap for the entire area on the square footage of office, commercial, the number of residential units. And over the course of the build out of the plan area, the city was really getting close to that cap. So it was getting to a point of the question of, okay, if you have a development that comes in under a streamlined process, it's consistent with zoning and general plan, but it's not consistent with the specific plan, what exactly do you do? So this one allows, it's more on the basis of density. There's no cap for either of those. But in general, I think, if you look at the 2001 plan, there's just more of everything in there in terms of, the kind of, design decisions down to, kind of what the bench needs to look like, what the lamps need to look like, everything that really is kind of redundant at this point because a lot of that is covered under the city's objective design and development standards, which didn't exist in 2001. So that's where a lot of, I think kind of some of the figures of, looking at, okay, what is this plan area going to look like? There's more flexibility with regard to that because there is this now existing, more comprehensive set of standards that apply to the whole city. So it was looking at kind of, not just looking at kind of the plan area as its own microcosm of, okay, once it hits this point, you're done, but how does this really meet and fit with all of the other, of the city's policies, goals, and, remain consistent with the general plan over the course of its build out.
So parking's been an issue that has kind of come up often throughout this whole process, going back since the beginning. In the packet, it talks about a parking management plan. Can you kind of dive into that a little bit, what that entails, and kind of how you feel like that may or may not address, or how that will help address parking in this area?
Yeah, so one of the constraints that we really faced as a main challenge is that the state is telling us, because you're so close to the train station, you cannot require any parking, but the community has said that's our number one issue. And so we were really kind of trying to think of ways that we could try to address both of those issues. That's where we came up with the idea of creating a new street standard that puts the angled parking there, which we don't have that anywhere else in Cotati. We have it downtown, but it's not in an established plan. But if you have parking that's that way, you can just, by its nature, fit more parking into a limited linear distance of frontage on a property. And while we can't require an X number of parking spaces be built on the private property, we can say this is our street standard for public streets in this area that just, by the way, happens to have some additional parking ability there. So that was one of the things we did. And then to your point, one of the issues that comes up in Santero is that a lot of folks, we've been told, that are using the train station, come there and park in the neighborhood, and then that limits available parking that's already constrained for neighborhood residents. And so a parking management plan, one of the ideas there, and this has been talked about since even before my time with the city, has maybe resident parking permits. So if you're a resident, you get a parking permit that allows you to park overnight If you're not a resident, you don't get that. You're subject to some type of hourly limitation or other limitations and restrictions on where you can park in the neighborhood. That's just one of the tools, but what the policy says is any new development, because they're going to have limited parking, is required to also propose a parking management plan telling the city how they're going to manage parking, given that they have these constraints where we can't force them to have X number of spaces.
If they wanted to include parking, is there room? I mean, I guess the vacant lots, they would just have to allocate areas within the development that would become parking. Is that kind of how they could add in parking spaces?
That's great. So that's correct. So while we can't require a minimum, developers are allowed to propose parking, and every developer we've talked about says, Cotati is not a market where you can't, rent or sell a unit without parking spaces provided. But there is a cap. They can only provide a maximum of 1.5 per unit based on these state mandates that we're trying to thread that needle.
And if I could just add to that on the parking conversation, I think Noah's absolutely right about, the minimums, lack of a minimum. It has to do with the feasibility of a project being able to be financed. But I think, just the parking management plan also speaks to some of the other aspects of the planning process in terms of transportation, like encouraging multimodal uses of transportation, making sure that people of all abilities are able to access transportation. And I think it kind of gets back, Commissioner Gilardi, to your point about state mandates and how it's constantly changing. There's constantly more from the state. And there's a number of different areas where some of these state mandates are sort of painting with a broad brush, like you don't have to provide parking for a senior housing development, but if you're using a density bonus and you're providing senior housing, but there's different kinds of senior housing. What would the parking management plan look like for, an ownership unit for 55 and older versus a memory care facility? Different need for cars, different need for ADA access. So I think that's something that's just kind of important to note where, if a development comes in, proposes 0 parking spaces, they don't have to provide, EV charging spaces. They don't need to provide ADA spaces. But the moment that part of their plan is to provide parking, then they're required to have those shares of ADA accessible parking, EV charging, bicycle parking, things along those lines. So that's really where the parking management plan comes in too, is just understanding kind of, okay, where is state law now in terms of parking policy? What can the city do? What can the developer do? And how can all of this remain in consistency with both local and larger policies?
Those are all the questions I have, and yeah, just we've been at this a long time, so happy to see us getting near the finish line. Looks great. Thanks, guys.
I also want to thank everybody the community and everybody involved in putting together this document. It is a document. It's something massive. I appreciated the history of the Miwok in there. That felt lovely to read. And how they use the land. And how we can learn from the Miwok how to use the land. It would, looking down the road, 20 years, it's a difficult position to be in here to try to make a decision about 1,800 folks moving into this cul-de-sac. I drove down it today. It's narrow. You can't pass 2 cars on the road. So we do need to think about how to leave and think about this, because it's not a question of when, it will happen. And reading about the fire pattern and the wind pattern, I watched the wind swirl today like this. That is what the wind was doing. It wasn't moving east. So things are changing, and we need to adapt and stay present in these moments and look into the future and keep our residents safe. To me, that's the main important part of my job right here. And I appreciate this document very much, and I appreciate the effort put into it and the comments made by fellow citizens and train riders. It brings it alive, and we do need to have our eye on the future, and Mother Nature is in charge. So we need to plan for the worst and hope for the best, and make sure that folks are safe. And I don't know, so I don't have a question except how to keep the fire out of Cotati, and that's not possible. And I see that we're hand in hand with Rohnert Park, however, we can't. How come, so this is my one important question in my mind, how come we can't make a deal with Rohnert Park that we can pass here and you can pass here? Because it might happen in Rohnert Park and they may have to flee to Cotati. I mean, it's a good idea to come together with our neighboring communities and find a way that's safe for everybody. So that's my thought, is let's not say that's Rohnert Park. No, we're all together in this. If it happens here, it may happen here, and we need to be able to find a way to evacuate, because we're all in this together. So, thank you.
Thank you. Have you looked at evacuation routes through the windmill development?
Yeah, so that was a prime goal of ours, was to try to be able to cross SMART and use potentially windmill farms, because there are a lot of kind of landing areas. And then also even into M section of Rohnert Park, if a portion of the sound wall was removed, there's a lot of street circulation over there. Unfortunately, SMART is very, I would say, concerned about at-grade crossing of any new at-grade crossing of their tracks. The plan does have policy that says if you choose to pursue this, here's how you do it. So it's not a no that you cannot cross SMART. We've talked to them. We've told them the importance of allowing emergency vehicle access across the tracks. They remain concerned about the potential for unauthorized access and then an accident happening with their trains. And so it's important to note the plan does anticipate that as a potential, but we don't rely on it because there's a lot of steps that would be required in order to get that crossing. Similarly with Rohnert Park, the plan has policies that said explore and maximize the connectivity that we can get, including into other jurisdictions, but we just don't have the control to force that to happen. If somebody wants to develop in Cotati and they're using Cotati land, the city has some ability to require things. If it's in an outside jurisdiction, we just don't have that same ability. So the plan anticipates the ability to do that, but it doesn't require it, and it looks to these other means that we've talked about to ensure circulation for emergency vehicles and evacuation. And I will point out one other thing. We totally agree with you that the road width is so narrow there that it makes challenges to people trying to come and go. That's recognized. The Cotati Station project that was previously approved was required to widen the road out, even for the existing development adjacent to some of those townhomes. That was to allow more parking and also to allow better circulation. That condition of approval will move forward with any future Cotati Station development. And the new street section even has a wider street than we typically would require to address this. So we've absolutely heard the residents' concerns over that issue and tried to be thoughtful about how we can address it going forward.
Thank you. Out of curiosity, so my understanding is the parking maximum of 1.5 per unit does not take into account bedroom count. That's correct? Do commercial lots have parking maximums as well?
They do, and those maximums are 4 spaces for every 1,000 feet of commercial development.
Okay, thank Thank you.
It's worth pointing out, that's actually the city's adopted standard. So 4 per 1,000 or 1 per 250 square feet is a pretty typical retail or commercial parking requirement.
Okay. And that's the maximum? What is the minimum? No minimum?
Yeah, no minimum.
For commercial, right, okay. I see a lot of questions in just concern, and it's not the first time, with upzoning and just kind of how that affects somebody and their existing commercial business. In particular, there's a letter on packet page 514 from Progress Glass Company, really just wanting to know how does it affect that business. So can you take a moment, I know we've already touched on it, but really let folks know how upzoning affects current businesses?
Yeah, so I'm glad you pointed it out. So that letter came in from Progress Glass when we first contacted them, when we were just beginning the EIR process. So know that comment came in before they had a chance to engage with us, before they had a chance to hear from us, and before we had a chance to hear from them. They were a part of the technical or the community advisory committee. They were on that process. They came to all of our meetings, and they have been accommodated in the plan. So specifically, the plan allows uses like Progress Glass, these kind of light industrial manufacturing uses that also have a retail component. They are allowed in the plan, and specifically because, you know, one of the challenges we have separate from housing is retail and business growth into the future, and accommodating kind of unique business types where they might manufacture a product, they might sell a product, they have some combination of things, whereas historically retail and manufacturing were separated. We see that as the future, and so we think that's an important component, and the plan absolutely allows it.
I'll just note as well that in the TOC policies, there's a requirement for consideration of commercial stabilization, making sure that existing commercial businesses aren't displaced through planning process actions. And we really viewed that holistically throughout the planning process, making sure that, you know, we're not running any businesses out of the plan area, really just providing more land use options, likely, you know, increasing the value of land in the process. But ultimately, you know, the goal is really not to, you know, require any businesses to go out of business because of any zoning decisions.
And I would say that's actually one of the flexibilities we looked for to Commissioner Long's question earlier of before the plan is very prescriptive, it will have X square foot of office, X square foot of retail, and didn't allow any flexibility. That's one of the things we really looked to do for this plan, because it's a 20-some year plan. We have no idea where the market's going to go over that time period, so we tried to accommodate that diversity.
I also want to echo my fellow commissioners in saying thank you for creating this plan, for the diligence in which is very evidently here, how much you've listened to the Cotati residents, the amount of outreach that was done. I think some of the outreach comments that we got back were like, why are you asking me this again? I already told you, which is exactly what we'd like to see, is to ensure that we're hearing everybody's voice. And giving ample opportunity for that, which I feel like you did a very good job of here, and really hats off to you. Anything else?
In terms of electric versus gas, it seems like we're totally electric. However, there will be gas, it says, delivered to the site. Can you explain the gas and electric?
So you were reading part of the EIR, which has to assume that could happen. There's already gas lines run to the site for those existing homes. The building code does not say that you can't install new gas appliances, but it makes it very challenging to do so. I'm assuming many of the future developments in Santero Way will be all electric, but it's not a mandate. So if someone chooses to install a gas appliance or gas facilities, they have to offset the carbon impacts of that by making the building significantly more efficient, offsetting that through other ways. The most likely way that people are going to go is going all electric. But we have been told by the courts we cannot say no new gas connections.
And in terms of all electric, I've noticed the electricity going out more with regard to the fires that just happened in LA. My relatives have electric cars and they had to evacuate. And electric cars have very toxic batteries that when they catch on fire, they're difficult to put out. I wonder about electric and all electric, and if this is such a panacea like it's proposed to be. It concerns me to throw all our eggs in electric basket, because I want to get out if I have to get out. And if your electricity is out for 2 days before, is your car going to be charged to leave? So this is another concern in my wee brain about getting the hell out in a fire if I need to evacuate. And things that we need to be concerned about. Me as a planning commissioner, this late, it weighs on me. And I forgot to bring up folks with disabilities who can't get out. And we need to identify these people who need extra help, and folks need to want to leave if it comes right down to it. So, yeah.
Perhaps something that we can look at in a future agenda item to recommend to City Council is doing, Santa Rosa and San Francisco both done kind of neighborhood, neighbor fest activities where they're able to connect with their fellow neighbors and look at who would need help in an evacuation situation. So perhaps we could do that at a later meeting.
Yeah.
But I think
Okay.
it might be outside the scope of this plan.
You're right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Um,
Any further questions?
Yeah. I know it's been touched on lightly in the past about the possibility of a parking garage. And we own the one lot, gravel lot. Smart Station owns, as you had pointed out previously, their lot. This does not prohibit us from trying to negotiate with Smart to purchase that lot for a possible parking garage, which would add additional parking to that area, correct?
That's correct.
We have a resolution in front of us on packet page 637. Does anyone like to move?
Okay, I
Oh.
would like to make a
Oh,
resolution.
excuse me, Chair Moffett, we do have someone that would like to make a public comment via Zoom. I think it might be too late, but I just wanted to make you aware.
I mean, this is a public meeting. We're all about public comments. Let's put that timer up.
All right, Michelle, you have the floor.
Thank you. I just had a quick question. So the current residents on Santero are a mixture of homeowners and renters. So I'm just trying to figure out if the proposed developments are going to be a combination of the two still, or is it going to be primarily renters?
Yeah, so there's no development proposed with the current plan. It's just, it outlines the number of units and the type of units and the amount of commercial that can be built in the plan. Whether someone who wants to build those units is building them for sale or for rent is not something that the city can influence or require.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Nope, that is it.
Since we opened it back up to Zoom, does anyone else in the audience wish to add a comment that has not already done so? Okay.
I would like to make a motion to approve the Santero Way specific plan, environmental impact report, and the Santero Way specific plan update.
I'll second that.
Do roll call vote?
Commissioner Gilardi,
Yes.
Commissioner Berman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Long,
Yes.
Chair Moffett.
Yes. And with that, it is so. Thank you.
I just want to say thanks to Luke and the whole Four Leaf team. They did a great job. And everyone who participated with us through all of the surveys and CAC, and really appreciate it. And we are going to the city council for final action on February 11th, 6 p.m. here in the chamber.
Yes, can someone go? We'll take a brief recess while we find Commissioner Savage. 5 minutes.
Their application is not what so they submit, we say, your user look at it, is it complete, what's missing?
We'll have 30 work, this is more than, that's more than 30 days. If they submit on the 29th, 30 days, end of February.
Correct. So I'm saying that's on the 30-day timeline, whereas this would happen on the 16th of,
Clarify.
So when you submitted a planning application that you did for your project, you took a month to work.
Right.
For this notice of completion thing, that's a CEQA process for the sanitary plan. I have to do it in 5 days in order to shorten the time.
But this,
Oh, notice of complete application. Yeah, that's 30 days. And that's, hey, they're not like, sorry, notice of completion is
less 30 days.
Yeah, it's 30 days for completeness.
Okay, so that would be end of March, end of February.
Correct.
Okay. Is it 30 days or less or minimum?
That's a maximum,
Okay,
but almost nobody is complete on their first bill.
right. Next question is, we're gonna have to go, okay, I can be fast. Density bonus. Can you address or approve the density bonus if somewhere is not all of the land?
Yeah, doesn't it?
And I believe that is 5 minutes, so we'll call the meeting back to order. An official. I'll stop having fun with that, I promise. All right, we're gonna move on to information item on state and local regulations related to small-scale food and retail businesses. Who's presenting that?
Thank you, Chair Moffett. That will be me. Associate Planner Buss wrote the report, but I am presenting it for her this evening. She wasn't able to be here. This is item 8C, and we do have a presentation, some slides to go along with this. But the goal of tonight's meeting is to provide an overview of current laws and policies at the state and local level regarding small-scale food and retail businesses. There's been a lot of changes at the state level, and so we just wanted to kind of give the commission and the community an update on the status of all of those, and then let you know some of the things we're looking at as we get into our work plan for the next fiscal year. Some of these changes include micro enterprise home kitchen operations, otherwise known as MICOs, sidewalk vendors, cottage food operations, parklets, urban agriculture, and food trucks. A lot of these changes have changed, a lot of the state law changes have affected the way these can operate and also how the city can regulate them. And we want to just talk about some of the things we might want to consider moving forward. So we'll get into the next slide. And as I said, it's going to cover this kind of broad range of topics and specific types of mobile vending. We'll go to the next slide. So starting with MICOs, these are restaurants that are operated within somebody's home by a resident. They're limited to 30 meals per day or 90 meals per week. Those are both maximums. They're allowed by state law, and the city can do very little things to regulate or affect them. There's some details regarding the state laws in the staff report, and staff can provide some more details or specifics if there's questions. But the goal is to provide opportunities for disadvantaged folks who might have limited access to resources to like open their own, brick and mortar restaurant, increase community access to healthy food, and then also increase food safety among existing MICOs. So there is a number of these that were operating kind of under the table, so to speak, and so in a goal to try to bring them into the light, the state passed this law and the county opted into it. And so because the county opted into it, we're along for that ride. And so we're into it. And so as of January 1st, these are allowed, and we are going to be partnering with the county to start to talk about a task force for enforcing regulations, the health department requirements, those types of things. And we'll go to the next.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Are there any in Cotati or anyone interested in Cotati?
We actually have had one person who's inquired about it since it's kind of become known that this was moving forward. Yeah. We'll go to the next slide. Just as I said, these are by right in residential areas. There's no local zoning or building regulations allowed. We can require a business license. We can enforce noise and nuisance standards. So if somebody was trying to stay open late at night or have, use their front yard and have big gatherings, we could enforce those to try to minimize impacts on the neighborhood. We can also continue to enforce like our compostable container requirements and those types of things, parking in unpermitted areas, those types, but the basic operating a restaurant from your home with those meal caps is allowed, and we cannot stop that. They all require an annual health department inspection, and then the county, as I mentioned, is kind of creating this task force to start to talk to all the other cities about how we're going to regulate and enforce these if we start to have enforcement issues.
Do they allow dining at the home?
Correct, yeah, you could do it as to-go or with dining. Yeah. We'll go to the next slide. So then that's the kind of the summary for Miko's, but there is a lot of information attached in the packet that provides some additional information, and staff is able to answer any questions as well. But getting right into sidewalk vending. So some recent state law allows sidewalk vending of food and merchandise on public sidewalks and parks. These are called compact mobile food operations, which include limited food preparation. Sidewalk vendors may make sales from a push cart, a stand, a wagon, or other non-motorized conveyance. So it's both like a hot dog cart or also somebody setting up a little stand and selling things from that. Sometimes you see that after concerts where they have like a grill, propane grill, and they'll set up and cook food there. Or even from their person, like so you see somebody carrying maybe like cotton candy or something, that people are allowed to be mobile vendors that way. They are required to have a health department permit, and we have very little latitude to regulate this use. We can enforce some things related to health, safety, and welfare, and attachment 2 to this report is a summary of those regulations that are in effect today. That's currently allowed, and we've even seen some of these start to pop up. You guys have seen them probably on Old Red, and then even some of the existing businesses have kind of taken advantage of these types of mobile vending operations that are allowed. We'll go to the next slide. We are allowed to have some regulations of these, but we have to adopt an ordinance in order to do so. Even for there's some interpretations that say even for us to require a business license, we have to have an ordinance that kind of specifies the how and the why. So we look to us recommending the city council include this in our work plan. So we will be recommending the council kind of prioritize us bringing this forward in order to put some limitations on things, maintaining ADA access, ensuring, if proper disposal of like cooking oil and those types of things. There have been some reports of challenges with these types of issues, and so we just want to have some regulations in place in case we start to have those issues, so we can enforce them. But we haven't had really any negative stories in Cotati of these types of operations, and we know there are some. However, most of them, I think, may not be aware of the need for business license and those types of things. So we're going to get an ordinance in place so we can have those conversations. We'll go to the next slide. So cottage food operations. This law has been in effect since 2013, so I think a lot of people are aware of cottage food. This allows the use of a home kitchen for processing food for sale to the public. And it's typically food that are determined to be non-potentially hazardous, or things that aren't likely to grow bacteria or other toxic microorganisms at room temperature. So it's a lot of baked goods, candies, dried goods, extracts, jams, preservatives, mustards, honeys, those types of things. They can occur, the sales of these foods can occur either directly from the producer at their event or at their home, or from events like the farmer's market. So somebody can make, a tincture on their home kitchen and sell it at a farmer's market legally. They can bake cookies in their home kitchen, sell it at a farmer's market legally, those types of things. That's cottage food. In Cotati, we have what's called a home occupation permit, and it doesn't consider cottage food because it was adopted in 2004. And so this is another place where staff is going to recommend that we update our current regulations to just be thoughtful about this kind of widened state allowance, just to make sure, as you've heard us talk about with a lot of our efforts, that our local regulations are in line with our state laws, but then also give us the tools to enforce things where we can and feel like there's a potential we might have to. So that's the summary on cottage operations. We'll go to the next slide. And then some Cotati specific things we've done. So parklets, we embraced parklets for outdoor dining during the COVID pandemic. The city even had purchased those tents that many of our downtown businesses used to survive through that. And after the parklets, the tents were removed, we prepared guidelines for the installation of maintenance of private parklets, both in public land and private land. To date, only Flagship is the only parklet that we had built, but they took a couple of their parking spaces and they built that outdoor dining. It looks very nice. It's well utilized. It allows them kind of additional flexibility in their business operations. And so we'd really like to kind of look to the parklet program as an option to maybe allow some of this outdoor vending or outdoor cooking to give another facet to business operations. And so we're thinking of trying to find ways that we can kind of hybridize what we've done with parklets to allow our existing businesses to kind of think about new creative things. Frankly, some of them are already doing, like the tamales that they sell at Mambo's, or I think even down adjacent to at Zena's, I think they had an outdoor dining or outdoor cooking food stand, or they talked to us about it anyway. I'm not sure if they ever opened, but there's basically some of our businesses are looking into options for how they can have an outdoor cooking and selling area, and we're thinking of using the parklet concept as a tool for that to try to be thoughtful about ways that it could work, put some regulations around it, but also allow kind of these experimentation of different business models.
The parklet policy, it has to be tied to a restaurant?
I can't remember. Originally, we did not. Yeah, it has to be a business, correct.
Tied to a physical business?
That's correct.
Adjacent to parking space?
That's correct, yeah. So then the commission, some of you were involved in the gardens, stands and produce stands with the urban agriculture ordinance in 2022. So people who grow food at their house are now allowed to sell it from their home. The city supported that, and we have that ordinance in place. There's limitations. It's up to 3 days per week if you live in a residential neighborhood. If you want to have a full-blown produce stand, then you have to get a use permit, and that has some additional requirements. But we did set up a mechanism where people can grow and sell food from their homes throughout the entire city. And then lastly, we have food trucks. So,
Quick question.
Yeah.
Has anyone utilized that?
I have heard stories of, but I haven't seen myself, of folks on the west side selling eggs and selling tomatoes, kind of like a lemonade stand. So the idea is you set it up, you break it down every day. We don't want a permanent structure set up. But I have heard that did occur kind of when people get their bumper crop at certain times of the year as a way to kind of share with the community, and also maybe, for a younger person to make some extra cash. And then we will go to the next slide. And that talks about food trucks. So one of the unique things about Cotati is food trucks are not mentioned anywhere in our zoning code. And so historically, the interpretation has been that they fit into this outdoor display and sales category. And so it really limited the ability for them to be utilized, and only on existing businesses, existing restaurants could have a food truck. They've grown in popularity over the last decade. They've kind of seen as a tool to incubate small businesses and enliven street scenes, expand the range of culinary offerings in a community. There's been some studies that kind of show, are they really a impact to your existing brick and mortar restaurants? And the results of some of these studies is that no, they're not. They tend to compete with fast food, really, is who their main competition is. And so given all of these things, that we could maybe have some increased foot traffic. It's maybe an option for innovation in the food scene. We'll go to the next slide. And that's this food truck truth study that was attached to the staff report. But we'd like to really formalize how food trucks are discussed in the zoning code, have a community conversation with the commission and the council and the community about where and how we might start to allow food trucks to operate in town, especially given all of these other mobile vending options that are now on the table. We think kind of having nothing about food trucks is just a hole in our ordinance, given that you could have a push cart or even, set up a stand yourself, but you couldn't have a food truck. So that's something we'd really like to address in the zoning code. And so we do plan on bringing an ordinance, or we'd like to plan to bring an ordinance to the Planning Commission and City Council to get input on that. And we'll go to the next slide. So as we mentioned, is it time for new policies? It's just because of, again, all of the changes in food production and kind of food preparation laws, we see as a potential economic opportunity. And then there's some different places where we're thinking about trying to allow them or utilize them, whether it's private commercial property, public property, those types of things. We'd like to get some input from the commission and the community as we craft that ordinance. Obviously, depending on council's priorities with our upcoming work plan process and strategic planning, which is really getting going in the early part of this year. We'll go to the next slide. And so potential future actions that will be coming, get in light of all of these things, are an ordinance to further regulate street vendors, update the home occupation ordinance, and then talk about where and how food trucks could be allowed throughout the city. And with that, we'll go to the last slide, which is just questions. I know there's kind of a lot of information referenced, but we just wanted to let the commission know, and the community know what the status of all of these things that we're starting to see pop up, where it's coming from, and then also kind of what we're thinking about doing to try to respond to it.
Comments, questions, concerns?
It's a good thing that we're bringing forward. Just an interesting thing. I was at the outdoor market that the chamber had just before Christmas. 2 different people asked me if I had tried any of the street vendors, that they said the food was fabulous. So that, I think that's a positive. That nobody complained. They thought it was a good thing. And for me, I did not know that we didn't have anything on the books as far as food trucks were concerned. Because in more than one occasion, I have seen food trucks at the gas station there on Cravestein Way. I've just never really, I'm like, they're there, I never really gave it any second thought, but we've never addressed it, obviously, and so it's good that we're gonna be putting that as part of this ordinance. So thank you.
So is there a plan to develop an ordinance around food trucks, or?
Yeah, we'd like to. We have to this presentation is going to the city council tomorrow to let them know kind of all the things that we just shared, and that it is our goal to put that into our work plan for the next fiscal year.
The other things that you touched on, do any of those require further work from city staff?
So we feel that to the point that the staff report identifies where if you don't have an ordinance, you don't have the legal ability to regulate some of the things, even that may be allowed under the law, like such business license requirements, those things. We feel it's important to do it, and we will be telling the council that and hope that they support us spending the time to get that ordinance. Correct. Correct.
Okay.
Carla, real quick, can you mind putting the PowerPoint back up and go to the second to last slide and just leave that up for us? Thank you.
Further questions from you?
Okay, I love all of this. One, I love food. But also, I feel like so many of these really promote kind of vitality, people coming into Cotati. It really promotes culture. Food is so integral to different types of cultures around us. I think that it's important that we maintain health standards, of course, but we don't hamper creativity or vitality or action. I read an article the other day that talked about it. I think the title of it was, "Is Cotati becoming Sonoma's food hub?" And yes, I hope that we are. Like, there's so many great restaurants that are coming in, that have already come in, and seeing more of this. My suggestion would be to shift some of your language, instead of it being, we can't stop them, to this is a great opportunity for more people to come in, more businesses to come in. I love everything about it. I want to try a micro restaurant in somebody's home, eat all of the different vendors around, not to eat them, but their food, sorry. I can't love it more. It sounds great, and I have the utmost confidence that, you'll be able to maintain food safety throughout the city, but still draft these ordinances in ways that promote business and creativity.
Yeah, I can see a food truck on Redwood Drive down at the industrial areas. It's a desert there. You have to walk 5 minutes to get to food. So why not just have it drive up and be there? It could be great. So, and also in the EIR, they were talking about the food truck by the Katati station, having a little area like that. And that makes sense because it's a small area, but you can have a lot of options in a small area. Yeah.
Have you seen those really cute, coffee food trucks? Yeah, get those morning commuters. Thank you for the presentation.
I'm not sure the language, but I would like to include a recommendation from the council that you do pursue those ordinances. So,
Would that be supported by the rest of the commissioners?
Yes.
Okay.
Is there a way to enforce them?
That's why we need the ordinance.
Okay, but if we have it, will it be enforced?
Well, so our code enforcement staff and resources are limited. So we have 1 day a week code enforcement officer that we we've definitely booked out his time for the entire time that he's been hired in Katati. He is very busy when he's here. What that's done really is push code enforcement onto some other community development staff. And I would say primarily myself and Carla are the other folks who kind of pick up some of the enforcement needs. What that really does is we have to prioritize our efforts. And so life safety, building construction without a permit, which could lead to life safety issues, improper human habitation, those are the top priorities that we respond to. We prioritize our resources based on that. And then other issues kind of in a cascading tier, we have a policy, internal policy that directs how we utilize our code enforcement staff and resources. So to your point, there could be an individual violation that does not get immediate attention based on our limited resources. But we do our best to respond, and we do, when something's critical or potentially affecting people's access to ADA, those types of things, we make it a top priority to get out there and make sure that A, the access is available and the circulation, people can move around, and B, the person who's potentially violating is informed of the requirements and rules and has a chance to correct, because that's all we want is compliance. We just want people to follow the rules, and then we won't have any of these issues.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 9, reports by staff.
Thank you, Chair Moffett. I'm realizing I did not bring my notes with me on my department.
Realizing I did not bring my notes with me on my department report, I do want to announce the Sustainable Katati, Climate Ready Katati Sustainability Fair. The date has been set for that, and I'm worried I'm going to misstate it without my... Thank you, sir. March 29th. That's correct. It's a Saturday. It's 2 to 10 at the depot. So one of the things we heard going through all the engagement process is people really want to see more events occurring at the depot. And so staff really does a lot of work on sustainability. The council's prioritized sustainability. And so we wanted to take the opportunity to try to bring a lot of sustainability options and resources to the community. Utilize the depot. People can take the train there. There's going to be demonstration rides from Redwood Mobility, the bike share. There's going to be an electric bus from Sonoma County Transit. There's going to be a clothing swap, a book swap, a lot of other
Folks are going to be there talking about sustainability options and opportunities throughout the county. And I'm sorry I did not bring my list of all the potential vendors. We're still finalizing that list, but we do think it'll be pretty robust and a really good time. We will have a kid event, some children's event. There will be some food trucks there, assuming the city council approves the event permit, which is on their agenda tomorrow. The other thing I'd like to announce is the Sentara Way specific plan is going to the city council on February 11th, as I mentioned. So anybody who's interested in that, please hold that date. And then lastly, the League of California Cities has a Planning Commissioners Academy that's going to be in Santa Rosa. I've sent out an email identifying the opportunities. The city will pay for that if commissioners are interested. Please let me know so we can get people registered. It's a 3-day event. Even if you can't go the entire time, I think it would be worth your time. If you look at the agenda, there's some really good sessions. And so I would just encourage you to go if you can. It's Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday at the end of March as well. And I have those dates in your inbox.
5, 6, and 7.
Oh, there you go. Beginning of March. Yep. And that's my department report.
Okay. Any reports by the planning commission?
It's been a couple months, but I noticed the Pete's Coffee has done some nice landscaping, which had been brought up quite some time ago. So I appreciate whoever helped facilitate that process. It looks really nice.
Okay. Any items received after agenda?
Any news on the hotel? Is that, what's going on with that?
We don't have any news. They have continued to engage with us. They're talking to us. They had pulled a partial permit, and they're finalizing the details to move forward with the rest. And so that's where we are with hotel construction right now.
Anyone else? Okay. Any items received after agenda posting?
There was comments received that were forwarded on to the commission, and then staff responded to a commissioner question and provided that information to the entire commission as well in a hard copy, so you had access to those. That was regarding the total number of units in the Santero plan versus the full amount of the whole EIR scope. There were some of those numbers were talked about tonight, and so just staff wanted to provide the specifics.
Okay. And with that, we're adjourned.
Relate and transition to our surrounding context. So what you'll see from Paul in a little bit is that it's primarily 3 stories, but we are stepping down to our neighbors to 2 stories.